shorter than 20 minutes as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Every week that we are here, I try to remind this body of the damage that carbon pollution is doing to our atmosphere and oceans. Try to awaken us to our duty. I've done it more than 30 times now. I've tried to kick out the underpinnings of any argument that the deniers could stand on. I've kicked out the scientific so-called denial argument, which actually properly belongs in the category of falsehood, not argument. I've kicked out the economic denial argument, pointing out that in a proper market, the costs of carbon must be in the price of carbon. I even tried to kick out the religious denial argument, showing that the belief that God will just tidy up after us, however stupidly we behave, runs counter to history and counter to biblical text. So today, let's take a crack at the political argument. How wise is it for the Republican Party to wed itself to the deniers and proclaim that climate change is a hoax? Make no mistake, that is the Republican position, the consensus Republican position, and the default Republican position is that climate change is a hoax. It's been said right on this floor and in committees, and as far as I know, not one Republican senator has stood up afterwards in this chamber to say, wait a minute, not so fast, that's actually not the case. Any Republican senator who disagrees, please come to the floor and articulate a Republican position other than that climate change is a hoax. This chamber looks relatively empty, but on C-SPAN lots of people are watching and lots of Republicans are watching, yet not one Republican over all 30 speeches has ever gotten back to me, even quietly on the side, to say, you know what, this is really getting serious. Let's see if we can work on this together. Madam President, an iron curtain of denial has fallen around the Republican Party. So let me respectfully ask my Republican colleagues, what are you thinking? How do you imagine this ends? More than 95% of climate scientists are convinced that human carbon pollution is causing massive and unprecedented changes to our atmosphere and oceans. You want to go with the 5%? And you think that's going to be a winning strategy? Moreover, it turns out that a lot of those 5%ers are on the payroll of the polluters. You know that. It's public knowledge. Some of those payroll scientists are the same people who denied acid rain, who denied the dangers of tobacco. You still like those odds? Those are the folks to whom you really want to hitch your Republican wagons? You've got to know that they're not telling the truth. So where does this go? What's the end game? Our planet has had a run of at least 800,000 years with levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere between 170 and 300 parts per million. That's measurement, not theory. 800,000 years. Homo sapiens have only been around for about 200,000 years. So that 800,000 years, 8,000 centuries, it takes you back a ways. 800,000 years between 170 and 300 parts per million, and in just the last 50 years, we've blown out of that range and have now hit 400 parts per million and climbing. And you really want to be on the side of nothing's going on here? Really? Have you noticed the floods and wildfires and droughts and superstorms and tornadoes and blizzards and temperature records? Have you noticed those warming, rising seas? Have you noticed species invading new territories and miles of dead pine forests in the Rockies and Arctic sea ice disappearing? Do you understand that carbon in the atmosphere gets absorbed by the sea and that that is a law of science and is not debatable? Do you understand that because they are absorbing the carbon, the oceans are getting more acidic? 30% more acidic already and climbing. Do you understand that's a measurement, not a theory? It's one thing to be the party that stands against science. Are you really also going to be the party that stands against measurement? And do you know the measurement is showing that the oceans are not just becoming more acidic, they're becoming more acidic at the fastest rate recorded in a geologic record of 50 million years. Have you not heard about the coral reefs, those incubators of our oceans, bleaching out and dying off, with almost 20% gone already worldwide? If you're a denier, look around. Do you think the news is really getting better for you? Let me ask my Republican friends, what's your best bet on whether this climate and oceans problem gets better or worse in the next 20 or 40 years? Seriously, your party's reputation is on the line here. All the chips. Tell me how you're going to bet. Do you want to bet the reputation of the Republican Party that suddenly this is all going to magically start getting better? Because that's what you're doing right now. And let me ask you this. What are the young people of today going to think when they are 37 or 57 and it really is worse, maybe a lot worse? What are they going to think about the Republican Party then? That you took the 5% bet with their futures? That you went with the polluters over the scientists? Young people are already out there asking their universities to divest from coal, as they divested from the evils of apartheid and the dangers of tobacco. Good luck with the youth vote when you lock in with the coal merchants. And by the way, the youth vote grows. It grows up and it sticks around. How is it going to look for the Republican Party when the historical record shows, because facts have a funny way of coming out, that the campaign to fool the public on climate change was just as phony and dishonest as the campaign to fool the public on acid rain and the campaign to fool the public on tobacco? When the historical record discloses that the 5% wasn't even real and was actually a scam paid for by the polluters. And you, your great party, with young Americans' futures in the balance, took sides with the scam. If that is the state of play for young voters as they come of age, why would those young people ever trust the Republican Party on anything else ever again? Speaking of taking sides, have you noticed who is left on your side? The Koch brothers, billionaire polluters. The big oil companies, the biggest polluters in the world. The coal barons, with their legacy of pollution, strip mining, mountaintop removal, and safety violations that kill their miners. There's a fine cast to be surrounded by. But wait, you say, there's more. There's the Heartland Institute and the Institute for Energy Research and the American Enterprise Institute and the American Legislative Exchange Council and the Heritage Foundation. There are many organizations. Right. Like the heads of Hydra, they may look like many, but as you know, in reality, it's all the same beast. It's all the same scheme. It's all the same money behind the scheme. You can name those front organizations and many more, but none of it is real. They're all just part of the same cheesy vaudeville show put on by the big polluters. Do you, I ask my Republican friends, really want to lash yourself to that operation, to go down with that ship? The great Republican Party, the party of Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt, branding itself as the one that gave it all to protect a gang of scheming polluters, that's where you're headed. Look who's on the other side, on record, against you, seeing through that nonsense. How about the Joint Chiefs of Staff, our military leaders? How about the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops? How about NASA? NASA's driving a vehicle as big as an SUV around on the surface of Mars right now. They set it there, to Mars. They landed it there safely, and now they're driving it around on Mars. Do you think those scientists just might know what they're talking about? How about every legitimate American scientific professional society, about 30 strong? How about major American corporations like Walmart, Ford, Apple, Coca-Cola? How about global insurance and reinsurance businesses like Lloyd's of London and Munich Re, whose business depends on accurate risk models? Indeed, today, Frank Nutter, the president of the Reinsurance Association of America, is reported as saying, and I'll quote this, it's too good, "Insurance is heavily dependent on scientific thought. It is not as amenable to politicized scientific thought." So I ask my Republican friends, whose side do you like in this? In this corner, the Joint Chiefs, the bishops, Walmart, Ford, Apple, Coke, NASA, 30 top scientific organizations, the top insurers and reinsurers, and by the way, several thousand legitimate others. In that corner, the polluting industry and a screen of sketchy organizations they fund. Let's be serious. Do you really want to bet the reputation of the Republican Party that the polluters are the ones we should count on here? Because that's what you're doing. And for what? To protect market share for the polluters. That's your upside. The reputation of the party hangs in the balance, and your upside is market share for polluters. Look, I'm willing to do a carbon pollution fee that sets the market in balance and returns every single dollar to the American people. No new agencies, no new taxes, no bigger government, every dollar back. Just a balanced market with the costs included in the price the way they're supposed to be, which will make better energy choices, increase jobs, and prevent pollution. Yes, that does mean less market share for the polluters as new technologies emerge. That is actually the point. But every single dollar back in Americans' pockets. And by the way, the American people, 3/4 of them believe that climate change is real and that we need to do something about it. So you may have a question for me. Why do you care? Why do you, Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island, care if we Republicans run off the climate cliff like a bunch of proverbial lemmings and disgrace ourselves? I'll tell you why. We're stuck in this together. We are stuck in this together. When cyclones tear up Oklahoma, and hurricanes swamp Alabama, and wildfires scorch Texas, you come to us, the rest of the country, for billions of dollars to recover. And the damage that your polluters and deniers are doing doesn't just hit Oklahoma and Alabama and Texas. It hits Rhode Island with floods and storms. It hits Oregon with acidified seas. It hits Montana with dying forests. So like it or not, we're in this together. You drag America with you to your fate. So I want this future. I want a Republican Party that has returned to its senses and is strong and a worthy adversary. In a strong America that has done right by its people and the world. That's what I want. I don't want this future. I don't want a Republican Party disgraced that let its extremists run it off the cliff, in an America suffering from grave economic and environmental and diplomatic damage because we failed, because we didn't wake up and do our duty to our people, and because we didn't lead the world. I do not want that future. But that's where we're headed. So I will keep reaching out and calling out, ever hopeful that you will wake up before it is too late, both for you and for the rest of us. I thank the presiding officer, and I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander. Mr. Chairman, I call Hirona 22, the Child Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which is similar to a bill introduced by Congresswoman Lucille Roybal Allard in last Congress.
22 is before the committee.
I have a second-degree amendment on which
And without objection, it is amended by the second-degree amendment, and as amended, it is before the committee.
This amendment was, the second-degree amendment was worked through with Senators Grassley, Feinstein, and the administration. And the purpose is basically to provide humanitarian assistance to unaccompanied alien children. And I will keep this short. So this is a common-sense amendment that is supported by a number of entities, and I do have letters of support for this amendment that I'd like to have entered into the record. I urge my colleagues to vote for the amendment.
I understand from the senator from Iowa that the senator from Hawaii has made some changes that he had recommended, and there's no further discussion on it. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I thank distinguished senator from Hawaii for the briefness of her remarks, but again, it seems the briefer they are, the easier they pass. Now we have an amendment from Senator Grassley, and I understand you want to amend it with a second degree.
I think another senator wants to do that, and I think if he would make change, it'd be satisfactory to me. It would be Amendment 44.
Amendment 44 is before the
Thank you.
for the committee.
I think we'll wait for Senator Schumer.
Is there a second degree amendment to this amendment?
Mr. Chairman, there is.
The senator from New York has a second degree amendment.
I'd have a question of the senator from New York. If his second degree amendment would be satisfactory to me if he would strike lines 5 and 6.
You're fine with yes, that's the intention of the second degree.
Then the amendment number 44 by the senator from Iowa is amended with a second degree amendment from the senator from New York, having taken out the sentences indicated. Senator from Iowa.
Well, if you want to save some time here, I think that I just simply say that this upgrades people who are involved in drunk driving to a greater extent than they've been recognized in the past, and changes the law to make the penalties for that greater from the standpoint of qualifying for citizenship or not.
It's just that we didn't update it for the second degree, so you did it. It's all good.
Question.
Senator from California.
Yeah, as I understand it, and this is a very interesting amendment and an interesting issue. because a lot of people are killed by drunk drivers. As I understand what Senator Grassley is proposing, it expands the definition of aggravated felony to include a third drunk driving conviction for which the term of imprisonment is at least a year, and that at least one of those drunk driving convictions must have taken place after the date of the law's enactment.
Yeah, yes.
Now, the definition of aggravated felony is important because through statutory mandate, it's made the removal of aliens convicted of such crimes a priority. As a matter of fact, 10,000 were killed. Now, I'm not saying these are all undocumented people driving who killed 10,000 people. I'm sure it's a small number, but 10,000 people have been killed by drunk drivers in 2010. And, you know, I've noticed throughout a lot of the discussions on this, the issue of drunk driving keeps coming up. And I don't think this bill can end up as a sinecure for drunk drivers. I mean, if you're undocumented, you're unlicensed, you're driving without insurance, you're driving without a license, you're driving drunk 3 times, you don't get stopped the first time you drive drunk. Of that I'm fairly sure. It's a serious, serious thing. And I don't think we can just pass it over. So this really forces us to come to grips with this problem. To be candid with you, I'm not exactly sure where I am, but I think that are you saying, Senator Grassley, that if you have 3 drunk driving offenses, one of which takes place after this bill has passed, what happens if you have 3 drunk driving convictions before the bill is passed?
It wouldn't affect that. You'd have to have one afterwards, after the law.
Well, that might be salutary. Maybe people will begin to think about what they do.
Could I ask another
before they
hypothetical?
drive.
Suppose you had somebody who came to this country, say they're 15, 16 years old, whatever were the customs of their country, I don't know, but they were picked up at age 16, 17 years old in a couple of drunk driving matters. Now they're 50, 55, pillar of the community, raising a family, highly respected. They go out and they have 3 or 4 drinks, which would get them to a .08, depending on what the drinks were, and they get stopped. Do they suddenly get exported? I mean, now it's an aggravated, now that is an aggravated felony, the same as shooting somebody in a robbery. There's no discretion in the court?
You're right on that point. We don't have any carve-outs. I suppose that there's somebody on an ad hoc basis could be affected, as you said, but I think it is a serious matter. I didn't go into my remarks, but I could quote to you several instances of people killing, absconding, don't know where they are. An incident in Virginia of a drunk driver, immigrant, killing a Catholic nun as an example. And the fact that drunk driving is a problem, and we want to make sure that people that don't benefit from that, it's a problem I think we have to take care of. You probably know that in several different instances, when we've had discussions like this, I brought this issue up.
I do, and I
Mr.
appreciate
Chairman.
it.
No, sorry.
I was once recognized nationally for having probably the toughest drunk driving prosecution program in the country. So I hold no brief for anybody who's involved in drunk driving. I'm somewhat worried about making it an aggravated felony, especially when it may be 20, 25 years between the offenses. That's a concern I have, that it takes away all discretion from the prosecutor or the courts.
Oh.
Senator Schumer.
I support this amendment and agree with Senator Feinstein's comments, basically. Drunk driving is a serious, serious issue. Right now, under present law, it is not a deportable offense. And even if you have a series of them, what the amendment does is says if there are 3, that's quite a bit. Someone's gotten a lot of warning. Somebody's gotten known that they are causing real problems for people by doing it, that it is a deportable offense. And that makes a great deal of sense to me. And what we did is, with the modification, we've made sure that 3 is a deportable offense, whatever it's classified in by state law. This is a federal application based on the conviction of drunk driving. And I think it's a balance. Some might say it should be less than 3. But certainly 3 would be enough to make it a deportable offense. And one more point, Mr. Chairman.
And the third has to be after the bill.
The third has to be after the bill passed.
So someone can rehabilitate themselves and stand.
I would just make one more point. I want to thank Senator Grassley, Senator Sessions. This has been, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. The markup is something we haven't seen around here in a long time. Sitting down day after day on one of the most important issues facing America and debating the issues and more or less spontaneously modifying the legislation to make it better. And while we may have differing points of view on some of the fundamentals, that doesn't preclude us from coming together and getting some things done. And I want to thank Senator Grassley for working with me on this so that we could support it, and we do. I do.
I hope all senators will still be thanking me at 9 and 10 o'clock tonight, and 9 and 10 o'clock tomorrow night, and midnight on Wednesday, and Friday morning, and possibly Friday evening. And
you're doing a great job. You're giving everybody their chance to speak and moving it along, so keep it up.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you for that opportunity to speak. I wanted to thank Senator Grassley. I think he knows we are from neighboring states. We have people who drive a lot, and drunk driving is one of the leading causes of death. I spent a lot of my time as prosecutor taking on this issue, something I never thought I was going to do when I got into the job, and got the first felony DWI law passed in Minnesota, because we had so many people who were literally moving to our state because we weren't strict enough on drunk driving, getting arrested saying they had 16 DWIs, and they'd moved to our state because we didn't have felony DWI. So I really appreciate this. I strongly have supported this amendment. I'm glad it's a great improvement to the bill.
The underlying bill allowed for discretion. This allows for no discretion. Again, I've demonstrated that my own
suspension of the quorum call.
Without objections.
Before we move into other business this evening in the Senate, I would like to encourage all of our senators to be submitting whatever amendments that they have so we can begin to work through them. We want to work diligently through the amendments and to be able to move, obviously, as quickly as possible within reason, to be able to put together votes. And we would ask all of our colleagues, if they do have amendments, to let us know what they are and to file them as soon as possible so that we can begin working on those amendments. So I believe that Senator Cochran and I are both in agreement. We're anxious to get going, and looking forward to working with colleagues to dispose and vote on amendments.
Madam Chair, I'm pleased to join the distinguished chairman and urge senators who do have amendments to come to the floor and offer those amendments so we can proceed to complete action on this bill at a reasonable. I don't want to cut anybody off. Everybody has a right to be heard on whatever subject they wish to bring before the Senate. But we do have some senators we know have amendments that are relevant to the issue before us, and we're hopeful that we can consider all of them and give them the kind of attention they deserve.
I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.
I'd ask that we dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection, under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations, which the clerk will report.
Sheri Chappell of Florida to be United States District Judge. Michael J. McShane of Oregon to be United States District Judge.
Under the previous order, there will be 30 minutes for debate, equally divided in the usual form.
Madam President,
Senator from Connecticut.
I'd ask that I be allowed to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. It has now been almost 6 months since the horrible shooting in my state of Connecticut, in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, where 26 and 7-year-olds lost their lives and another 6 adults who were protecting them perished as well. We all believed that we were going to do something about it here on the floor of the Senate. We thought that we were going to come to our senses and finally realize that it is in part the laws of this nation that allow for this kind of senseless killing, whether it be in mass numbers in places like Sandy Hook or Aurora or Tucson, or in your state, Madam President, the Sikh temple, or in just the everyday average gun violence that has become background noise to this nation. It is not just about bad people doing bad things. It is also about the laws of this nation that have allowed for this to happen, because we don't have background checks on every gun purchase, so the criminals do get guns. We still allow for dangerous military-style weapons like the AR-15 and 100-round drums of ammunition to be carried on the streets of this country. We don't even have a federal law saying that it's illegal to traffic in guns, taking them out of gun shows and gun stores and then going out and selling them on the streets as straw purchasers to people who shouldn't have bought them in the first place. We had 55 votes in the Senate to do that, but we didn't have 60 votes, which is these days the law of the land here. And so, Madam President, I've promised every week to come down here and do something rather simple, which is to tell the stories of the dozens of people every single day who are killed by guns, because it's really their stories that will eventually move this place to action. I know that this place has enough empathy, enough compassion to not be so callous for month after month to do nothing about today, the 4,243 people who have died in this country since Newtown at the hands of gun violence. Let me tell you that number again. Since the massacre at Sandy Hook, when 28 people died, including the gunman and his mother, 4,243 people have died due to gun violence. And so I want to spend the next couple minutes before we get back to debate on these nominations just telling you the stories of a few of these people. On May 15th, 2013, just about a week ago, 5 different people were shot in Detroit. Halfway through May, there have been 73 shootings in Detroit, Michigan. 10 people have been killed. 8 of the shooting victims were 17 years old or younger. On that day, May 15th, 5 people were shot after a 24-year-old man opened fire after a pretty simple verbal altercation on the street. What happened apparently was that one parent of one child told the other kids to go home for some reason. Something had happened at their house. That youth returned to the house with some of his family members, including the 24-year-old man who got so upset over this simple altercation about a mom asking some kids to leave her house that he opened fire, killing Almater Walls and wounding the others. It was a pretty bloody 24-hour period in Detroit where 12 people were shot on that day from 6 a.m. on Wednesday until 6 a.m. on Thursday. 73 shootings halfway through May in one city alone. On May 15th, as well, Newark police said that an 18-year-old high school student, a senior, at Wequahic High School in Newark, New Jersey, was killed. He signed himself out of school after he wasn't feeling well. He was shot. Councilman Raz Baraka, who is also the principal of another high school, he said, "We are outgunned and outmanned here on the streets." There are so many guns on the street of Newark that principals and law enforcement feel outgunned and outmanned. Of the young student who was killed, his friend said he was a good kid. When he was little, we used to play pool and video games around here. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, just before sunrise on Mother's Day, police found 22-year-old Robert Rivera dead in his car from perhaps a dozen bullet wounds. He was one in a million, a friend said. No one will ever be like him. Chino, his nickname was. He was a good kid. His friend said, the good die young here. 22 years old, killed in a spray of bullets in his car in Bridgeport, Connecticut. These are the ones that we don't hear that much about because they're in the local papers. But we know that there are also these mass killings as well. And, Madam President, I just want to tell you, before I give back the floor, the stories of a handful of victims in your state who were killed at a Sikh temple when someone walked in August 2012 and opened up fire. Because people should know who these victims are as well. It's the victims of everyday gun violence, but we have had a string of mass shootings in this country, which is not going to end until we do something about it. Paramjit Kaur lived for her children. She spent 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, in production at a medical devices firm in order to provide for her children. She was praying inside the temple when she learned of the active shooter outside the temple, and instead of being afraid, she showed great courage, bowed down, and prayed one last time before she was shot. Satwant Singh was the founder and the president of that Sikh temple. He worked 18 hours a day at his family's gas station to provide for his family. His hard work as a small businessman paid off, and he acquired 8 stations by the end of his career. His attempts to thwart the gunman with a small, dull knife gave a group of women, including his mother, the chance to escape. Suveg Singh Katra is a former dairy farmer in northern India, and she came to the United States for a better life. He came to the States for a better life. He was a humble and loving man who was a constant presence at that temple. And he was a man of habit. He'd wake up every morning at 4:30, watch the news and a live broadcast from India, and engage in readings from the Holy Book. He died at age 84. Prakash Singh was a pious man, but with a great sense of humor. He actually stayed in the priest quarters in the temple, and he was really excited by the fact that he was about to, for the first time, get an apartment outside of the temple. They were due to move into their new home at the end of August, just a few weeks after he was killed. And then the 2 brothers, Ranjit and Sita Singh, were brothers and Sikh priests who left their families behind to move to Oak Creek for a better life. Ranjit was the more outgoing of the 2. His responsibility was to take care of every visitor who came through those doors, but his younger brother, Sita, was just as fun-loving and would wake up every morning at 5 a.m. to read the Sikh Holy Book. His specialty was making sure that everybody who walked into that temple had enough to eat. All perished at the shooting in a Sikh temple. These things are going to happen again, Madam President. There's going to be another mass atrocity. There are going to continue to be these shootings in Detroit and Bridgeport and Newark if we don't do something about it on this floor. I know we have important business, whether it be the Farm Bill this week or our hopeful attempt at passing immigration reform. But as soon as that is done, hopefully we will get to come back to this issue of gun violence. Because if we don't, these everyday urban stories will mount, and there will be another mass shooting somewhere across this country. Thank you, Madam President. I now yield back the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Florida.
I would say to my colleague from Connecticut, amen. And I would say to my colleague from Oregon, thank you for his courtesy in letting me go ahead in light of the fact that we have a federal judge coming up for a vote at 5:30, and I am very, very grateful to the Judiciary Committee, to both the Democrats and the Republicans that are allowing us to vote, and I urgently implore to confirm Judge Sheri Chappell to the United States District Court for the Middle District of Florida. But while I rise to speak in favor of Judge Chappell, I want to express my concern for the growing partisanship that is dragging down our efforts to fill these judicial vacancies across the nation. In the past, we've had qualified consensus judicial nominees. They'd be confirmed in weeks, if not in days. And unfortunately, even the judicial nominees of the support of both senators from the state, and sometimes, in the case of Florida, the Republican Senator Rubio, and me, the Democratic senators, we're still finding that the judges are being held up. We're experiencing waiting months for an up or down vote, only then to be confirmed overwhelmingly. Of course, I yield to the distinguished chairman of the Judiciary Committee.
I'd say to my dear friend, the senior senator from Florida, I share his frustration. We put these judges through the Senate Judiciary Committee, often with a unanimous vote, and then they wait here months and months waiting to get a vote on the floor. And as the distinguished senator from Florida noted, and then that vote is virtually unanimous. I am very afraid this continues, this effort that if somebody is nominated by President Obama, we must block them even if it's somebody we support. That kind of view, one, is totally unfair to the president. It's completely unfair to the country, but it's devastating to the judiciary because good men and women are not going to be willing to take nominations to be or appointments to be a federal judge if they think they're going to wait month after month after month or even a year before they go on the bench. So I appreciate the distinguished senior senator from Florida's making the statement he did, and I share his frustration.
And I thank the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And a good example, we passed, now this isn't even a federal district judge, this is a court of appeals. We passed the judge 94-5 when we finally got a vote. That was Judge Adalberto Jordan, the first Cuban-American born judge from Miami to serve on the U.S. Court of Appeals. The 11th Circuit is one of the busiest circuits in the country. It encompasses the southeastern United States. He was unanimously reported out of the Judiciary Committee, but he was blocked by a filibuster of judicial nominees after 4 months of waiting on the executive calendar. Now, obviously, with a vote of 94-5, he was eminently qualified. He was not controversial. He had Senator Rubio's and my support, unanimous vote in judiciary, and yet his nomination was filibustered. So, in addition, highly qualified district court judge nominees are facing the same partisan delays. Obviously, these nominees ought to get confirmed without the needless obstacles facing potential cloture motions just to receive an up or down vote. And I'm told that the majority leader has had to file cloture on as many as 20 of the federal district court nominees since 2009. It's an indication that we're clearly going in the wrong direction in this Senate. Give you one other example. Here, the judge that we are about to confirm, and before the chairman came in, I thank profusely him and the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee for bringing Judge Chappell up for a vote today. There's no controversy on Judge Chappell. She has the support of Senator Rubio and me. She was voted out of the Judiciary Committee twice, unanimously. And it is a judicial vacancy emergency declared in the Middle District of Florida. Well, she has waited, and today is the 329th day. I will put into the record all of her qualifications. I refer to her as Judge Chappell because she was a county court judge and she serves now as a magistrate, and she's coming in at a needed time in a judicial emergency. But, Madam President, there are 34 judicial emergency vacancies across this nation right now. There are 2 in the Middle District of Florida and 2 in the Southern District of Florida. In total, there are 84 judicial vacancies waiting to be filled and 28 nominees stuck in the pipeline waiting for confirmation. And so the courts obviously are overburdened, which means that our citizens are seeing their day in court delayed, and the public is concerned about this. And I just again want to thank the Judiciary Committee for bringing up Judge Chappell. But it can't keep going on like this, and I hope we're going to see some reform and movement quickly.
Madam President,
Senator from Vermont.
Madam President, I know that even the Wall Street Journal said the Senate's inability to pull out of partisan ruts and get beyond an epidemic of filibusters is hurting Judge Chappell. The judicial vacancy, emergency vacancy, has been for 400 days. She was nominated almost a year ago. In the committee, every single Republican voted for her, as well as every single Democrat. A Democrat and Republican senator support her. So what I'm saying, when I say that President Obama's qualified consensus nominees have faced unprecedented levels of delay and obstruction, this is precisely what I'm talking about. I say unprecedented. Madam President, I've served longer in this current Senate than any member of this body. I've never seen such delays for the sake of delay of judges like we're seeing now, and the highly qualified judges. For some reason, there seems to be this antipathy toward anything that this president does, and I think it's wrong. People can determine themselves what the motives are, but it's wrong and it's severely damaging the independence of our federal judiciary. And I'd ask my full statement on Judge Chappell and Michael McShane be placed in the record as though read.
Without objection.
And that a statement on the Senate, update of the Senate Judiciary Committee's consideration of S-744, the so-called immigration bill, that be placed in the record.
Without objection.
I note that I hope we'll finish that this week. We'll go very late tonight, very late tomorrow night, very late Wednesday night. I will go all day Thursday and all day Friday. If necessary, we'll get it finished. And I see the I ask consent, Madam President, I be allowed to speak briefly as though in morning business about the Farm Bill.
Without objection.
You know, this Farm Bill represents 2 years of very hard work, and I compliment the distinguished chair of it, Senator Stabenow, who's done Herculean duties here. This will save $23 billion over 10 years. And it's remarkable when you consider the fiscal restraints we already face. It passed out of the Agriculture Committee with a heavy bipartisan vote of 15-5. Now, many of the Farm Bill programs expired last year because the House Representatives refused to take up the Senate Agricultural Bill, Farm Bill, which had passed here by an overwhelming bipartisan majority. I'm glad that in December we were able to prevent the dairy cliff, which would have wreaked havoc in the marketplace and on our farms. But the short-term extension of the Farm Bill is no rational way to legislate. The last-minute extension left dozens of critical agriculture programs stranded without funding. All of these things would have gone as they should have, with great savings to the taxpayers, if the other body had just taken up and voted on the bill we passed. I know in my state, agriculture is a major part of Vermont's economy, just as it is of our nation's economy. Very few nations, great power, can say as part of their national security they can feed themselves. And we have the ability to feed 320+ million Americans. That's part of our national security. Every farm bill is important to America. Every farm bill is important to the Green Mountain state of Vermont. One of the many key components of the bill in terms of Vermont and Vermont's economy is a significant dairy reform proposal that offers the best hope in decades of helping producers and consumers step off the dangerous roller coaster of wild price swings. We have to protect our dairy farmers from the volatility of turbulent price swings. We do it with a financially sound risk management program to help farmers themselves manage risk and margin volatility, and without driving up the cost of the government. And as the author of the Organic Foods Production Act, I'm extremely pleased the bill continues to make strong improvements for organic agriculture. Similar changes needed in the conservation title and unfair payment limits applied solely to organic farmers seeking to enroll in the environmental quality incentive programs organic. Naturally, I'm concerned greatly and disappointed by the $4 billion cuts in the SNAP program, which are predominantly going to come from the northeastern states. I understand it's a part of a larger compromise on behalf of the chairwoman, who has been a strong supporter of these nutrition assistance programs. But I compliment the chair and the ranking member for their work and their staffs in doing this. I ask my full statement be made part of the record.
Without objection.
And I yield to my distinguished colleague.
Madam President.
Senator from Oregon.
Madam President, I rise to speak to the nomination of Michael McShane to serve on the U.S. District Court of Eugene. Judge McShane is an exceptionally qualified nominee and will make a terrific addition to the federal bench in Oregon. Over his entire career, Judge McShane has demonstrated tremendous commitment to the law, to public service, and to our state. He came to Oregon 30 years ago to serve communities through the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. Jesuit Volunteer Corps, or is known as JVC, and JVC, folks often graduating from college, dedicate a year to direct service to the poor, simple living, and spiritual community. And they work in locations like food banks and local church programs to work with at-risk youth and things of this nature. They work directly to help make the world a better place and do so in an exceptional manner. And anyone who comes out of college and dedicates a year to such an effort certainly starts in a very sound place. Since that time, Judge McShane has remained deeply dedicated both to Oregon and to serving those in our society most in need. After graduating from Lewis and Clark Law School, Judge McShane went to work as a public defender in Portland. For more than 10 years, he represented those who otherwise would have no voice in our legal system. After his time as a public defender, he went to work on the circuit court, first as a judge pro tem and then simply as a judge. In the approximately 15 years he served on the circuit court, Judge McShane has developed an excellent reputation for fairness, thoroughness, and accuracy. He also continued to serve in the community as a foster parent and an adjunct law professor at Lewis and Clark College. In one letter of support that I received, a member of the Portland law community summed up his nomination by saying, and I quote, "What stands out to me is that Judge McShane lives and conducts his personal life with the same integrity, honor, compassion, diligence, and commitment that he displays as a judge. He will indeed make an excellent addition to the U.S. District Court, and I urge my colleagues present tonight to join in support for his nomination." Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor. Madam President, I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.